There is a version of Real Madrid walking out at the Bernabeu this season that should make every rival in Europe deeply uncomfortable. Not because of one signing, not because of one tactical tweak, but because of what happens when you put a manager who has never lost a war of wills back in charge of a squad built entirely for war. José Mourinho is back.
And Manchester United overturning the odds in the Champions League. And José Mourinho says, what were you saying?
جوزيه مورينيو فرحة ما بعدها فرحة سبحان الله وكأنه هو كريستيانو رونالدو أي فرحة وأي انتصار هو أحوج ما
13 years after he walked out of the Santiago Bernabéu, the special one has returned. And this time he is not walking into a rebuild. He is walking into a squad stacked with the most explosive attacking talent this club has assembled in over a decade. Kylian Mbappé, the reigning World Cup Golden Boot winner, a man who scored 42 goals last season for a team that won absolutely nothing. Vinícius Júnior, still one of the most feared one-on-one dribblers on the planet, a player defenders have nightmares about. Jude Bellingham, who scored 7 goals at a World Cup from midfield, numbers that belong to strikers, not number 8s. And now, Yan Diomande, a 19-year-old who cost Real Madrid up to 135 million euros, a player who out-dribbled almost everyone in the Bundesliga in his very first season as a professional. Put those 4 names in the same sentence, under the same manager, and you understand why the rest of Europe should be nervous. Because Mourinho has done this before. Give him a front line built for speed, for chaos, for punishing you the second you make a mistake, and he will build you a machine. He did it in 2011, when Cristiano Ronaldo, Karim Benzema, and Angel Di Maria destroyed teams in transitions like a phantom, and a teenager who Bundesliga defenders still have nightmares about. On paper, it does not look like a football team. It looks like a warning. But here is the part that should genuinely unsettle you if you are a Real Madrid fan watching all of this unfold. This is not a team that has been building quietly toward greatness. This is a team that just spent 2 years falling apart in front of the entire footballing world. Because before there was hope, there was heartbreak. Real, painful, very public heartbreak. Vinícius Júnior stood in a stadium in New Jersey this past summer and watched Brazil's World Cup dream die at the hands of Norway, and he went home and apologized to an entire country because the pain was, in his own words, almost impossible to put into words. Jude Bellingham scored 7 goals for England at that same World Cup, only to walk back into a Real Madrid shirt, where for most of the season before it, he had been quietly disappearing into a role that buried everything that made him special. And Mbappe, for all 42 of his goals, spent an entire season carrying a team that ended it with absolutely nothing to show for it. No league, no cup, no Champions League. These are not just players. These are men who walked off some of the biggest stages in football, still carrying open wounds. And somehow, all of them ended up in the same dressing room. A dressing room that, as we're about to see, came dangerously close to tearing itself apart before Mourinho ever set foot back inside it. To understand how Real Madrid got here, you have to go back to a season that started with so much promise it almost feels cruel in hindsight. Xabi Alonso arrived from Bayer Leverkusen carrying one of the biggest reputations in European coaching. Trent Alexander-Arnold had just joined from Liverpool. Mbappe was entering his 2nd season at the club, finally settled, finally ready to explode. On paper, this was supposed to be the most fearsome attack in club football. And for a while, it actually looked that way. Real Madrid even beat Barcelona 2-1 at the Bernabeu in October, in front of a season-high crowd of over 78,000 people who genuinely believed this was the year. But the consistency never came. There was no clear identity, no defined structure. And behind the scenes, whispers started growing about tension between Alonso and some of his biggest names. By January, the club had seen enough. Alonso was gone, dismissed on the 12th, with Álvaro Arbeloa stepping in as interim manager, a man who knew the club inside out but was never truly built to hold it together. And then, things got worse. Much worse. 2 days after Arbeloa took over, Real Madrid were eliminated from the Copa del Rey. Not by Barcelona, not by Atletico, by Albacete, a 2nd division side. In the Supercopa, they finished as runners-up. In the Champions League, they made it to the quarterfinals, only to lose a brutal tie to Bayern Munich, a tie that will forever be remembered for Eduardo Camavinga's red card in Bavaria, the single image that summed up an entire campaign falling apart in real time. And in the league, Barcelona wrapped up the title with a win over Madrid in the Clásico itself, rubbing salt into a wound that never really closed. Add in a humiliating 5-2 defeat to Atletico Madrid, and you start to understand just how far this club had fallen. 2 straight seasons, no La Liga, no Copa del Rey, no Champions League. Here is what makes it even harder to explain. The talent was never the problem. Individually, this attack was still doing damage. Mbappe still scored 42 goals in 44 matches. He still won the league's top scorer award. He was still the Champions League's leading scorer. Arda Güler was even named the competition's best young player. So what actually went wrong? The answer had nothing to do with talent, and everything to do with what was happening off the pitch. In May, something happened inside that dressing room that told you everything you needed to know about the state of this football club. Fede Valverde and Aurelien Tchouameni were involved in a confrontation serious enough that the club opened formal disciplinary proceedings against both players. Valverde ended up in hospital with a head injury. Both players were fined €500,000 each. This wasn't a group of superstars fighting for a common cause anymore. This was a team at war with itself, collapsing from the inside while the entire footballing world watched it happen from the outside. And somewhere in the middle of all that chaos, three of the club's biggest names were quietly carrying heartbreak that had nothing to do with Madrid at all. Vinícius Júnior went into the World Cup as one of Brazil's biggest hopes. He scored 4 goals, including in 3 consecutive matches, and for a moment it looked like this was finally his tournament. Then Brazil ran into Norway in the round of 16. Erling Haaland scored twice. Neymar pulled one back from the spot in stoppage time. It finished 2-1. Brazil were out, and Vinícius went public afterward with an apology to the fans, admitting the frustration was almost impossible to put into words. Jude Bellingham's story looked different on the surface. 7 goals for England as they reached the semi-finals, numbers that read like a superstars tournament. But underneath those numbers was a player who, for most of the previous club season, had been quietly disappearing, pushed into a deeper, more defensive role at Real Madrid because Mbappe and Vinícius weren't contributing enough defensively. Bellingham spent more time covering space than attacking it. The version of him that once terrorized the Bernabéu in his debut season had almost vanished entirely. So this is the club Mourinho walked back into. Not a project waiting to be built. A club that had just spent 2 years falling apart in full public view, carrying open wounds from a World Cup that gave as much pain as it gave glory. Which raises the real question. If this squad nearly destroyed itself from the inside, what exactly made Florentino Perez believe José Mourinho was the man who could put it back together? Real Madrid didn't respond to that chaos the way most clubs would. There was no dramatic press conference, no public purge, no scapegoat. Florentino Perez did what he has always done when this club hits its lowest point. He picked up the phone and called the one manager who has never cared about reputations, price tags, or egos. José Mourinho was officially announced on the 11th of June 2026, 11 days after Perez won his re-election with 65% of the vote. A 3-year deal, running until June 2029. 13 years after he walked out of the Bernabéu, the special one walked back in. And what he did in his first weeks tells you exactly how serious this rebuild really is. He didn't chase another flashy number 10. He didn't go shopping for another global icon to put his name on a shirt. He started from the back. Ibrahima Konate arrived to make Madrid physically harder to break. Marc Cucurella came in to restore discipline and aggression on the left. Denzel Dumfries added power on the right. Bernardo Silva was brought in to give the midfield the calm control it had been missing since Toni Kroos walked away. Only then did Madrid go and finalize the biggest deal of the summer, agreeing a fee of up to €135 million for Yan Diomande, a 19-year-old who had just terrorized the Bundesliga in his very first professional season. Notice the order: defense first, control second, explosion last. That is not the pattern of a club panic-buying stars. That is the pattern of a manager identifying exactly what broke and fixing it piece by piece. Because here is what almost nobody was saying out loud. The last 2 seasons weren't really about Real Madrid losing to better teams. They were about Real Madrid losing to one team that had figured them out completely. Barcelona, under Hansi Flick, didn't just beat Madrid. They systematically exposed every single crack. Their midfield overwhelmed Madrid the moment Kroos retired. Their wide players attacked exactly the spaces Madrid's aggressive fullbacks left behind. Their pressing suffocated Madrid's build-up before Mbappe or Vinícius ever got a real chance to hurt them. For 2 years, Real Madrid had all the talent in the world, and no answer for any of it. And that is what makes this version of the club so different. This isn't a team that got embarrassed and reacted emotionally by throwing money at the problem. Every single piece Mourinho has brought in solves something specific that Barcelona exploited. Konate closes the space in behind. Cucurella locks down the exact kind of one-on-one winger that gave Madrid nightmares. Bernardo Silva gives them the control in midfield they lost the day Kroos left. And Diomande does something no one currently at this club could do: attack defenses from the opposite side of Vinícius, so teams can no longer just load up on one flank and dare Madrid to find another way through. Put it all together and something changes. Mbappe no longer has to drop 30 or 40 meters just to get involved. Bellingham no longer has to babysit the space behind 2 attackers who give nothing back defensively. Vinícius no longer has to fight through a double team every single time he touches the ball, because now there's a second, equally dangerous outlet pulling defenders the other way. This is a squad that spent 2 years being taken apart in full public view, that watched its biggest stars carry very real, very personal heartbreak home from a World Cup that gave as much pain as glory, that nearly imploded from the inside before a ball was even kicked this season. And instead of falling apart completely, it has been quietly, deliberately rebuilt around exactly the wounds that were exposed. That is the part that should genuinely worry the rest of Europe. Not that Real Madrid have superstars again. They always had superstars. What's different now is that for the first time in 2 years, every single one of those superstars has been placed inside a structure specifically designed to make sure their talent never gets wasted again. Mourinho isn't walking into a broken squad hoping talent alone saves him. He's walking into a squad that has already been broken, has already felt what it's like to lose control completely, and has now been rebuilt around a manager who has never once let talent sit above the team. The old lion is back, and this time, he's not alone.